to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to?
That God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.
Welcome again to Street Talk. My name is Ahmad Shakaraki, and on Street Talk, we talk about things happening in Michigan, the U.S., and abroad. We talk about politics, social events, and joining me tonight,
Dennis Burnside.
Charles Thomas.
We got a lot to cover, but let's talk a little about this woman who lost her husband at 20. She was about 24, 25 years old. She lost her husband. She had 5 kids, and her husband died young. And from then on, she tried to get reparation for the people who had been enslaved. She died in 1928, but all during this time, and the U.S. would study. Every time she tried to do something, they would study, no, we can't let you do that. And she ended up spending 2 years in jail because of what she was trying to do.
Political prisoner.
Yeah, and this is, this is back then. And now we've seen all these years pass, and it was only 215 when a man in Detroit,
John Conyers.
when he got Congress to even look into it. And,
H.R. 42.
Yeah, and what's her name? The lady from Texas. She's working on it now.
Waters? No?
No, she's from Texas. Oh man. Anyway, so what do you think we're gonna get anything out of it this time?
No, odds are against it. It's not a matter of equity. It's not a matter of legal precedent. It's not a matter of whether or not we deserve reparations. That's never really been a debate. It comes down to pure hatred and white supremacy.
Okay.
If you look at most groups in the United States who have had atrocities or wrongs levied against them as a class, as a race, as a phenotype, as a social group, they've been able to get reparations. Probably the one semi-glaring exception to that is the Native Americans, who've been given virtually nothing relative to what they lost. But they have had some lip service. They were able to negotiate some land for themselves, which became known as reservations. Mm-hmm. Some of those reservations now are somewhat prospering with legalized gambling and entertainment. And so they have a hat to hang on that is just theirs. Mm-hmm. In fact, they have nations within the United States borders. But African Americans, and for that matter, Africans in the diaspora, have never been able to attain the type of respect and the type of recognition of our humanity that other groups do, that would say to someone who considers themselves to be moral and just and fair, to say, yeah, we do owe you. The island of Haiti, what we call Haiti, is a great example. You had a group of people who came from several different nations in West and Central Africa, enslaved, brought there, and for generations, for hundreds of years, they were brutally enslaved. And the French essentially worked them to death. That was their business model. They just go get more. And they were too careless to separate these people by language, as was done in the United States and other parts of the Americas. And they soon put their expertise in botany and plants and their training as warriors in West Africa and their ability to communicate with each other surreptitiously that the French couldn't understand. And they created a revolution. And after a successful revolution, which entailed them beating the French, then beating the English, then beating the Spanish, who were all taking opportunities to try to take over this weak nation, reinstall slavery, and enjoy the fruits of the crop there, the sugar cane mainly. Then they defeated the French again under the direction of Napoleon's brother-in-law. And the French were able to extract reparations from Haiti for having the temerity of fighting to become free and not enslaved. They had to pay the French the equivalent in today's money, $21 billion, which took them until the early 1920s to pay, but they did pay. And since then, you've seen an embargo against the French people. People won't trade with them. People won't give them the same type of opportunities to grow economically that other nascent languages, nascent nations enjoy. And you see their people treated as less than human beings. And you see the same thing in the United States when Haiti said to the United States, let's be partners. We have a similar ideology. We have a similar philosophy. We have a constitution that we modeled after your constitution. Our revolution was inspired by the French Revolution just 10 years before our own. We're not that much different than you. Let's trade. Let's join in economic forces. The United States refused to, and they agreed with the embargo that's been going on throughout the Western Hemisphere to this very day. And you see the same thing in the United States. African Americans here, after 400 years of enslavement and another 100 years of Jim Crow, neo-slavery, finally got to the point in 1965 where they got the right to vote. First time the United States ever had a true democracy, modicum of a true democracy. And ever since then, the fight has been to prevent Africans in America from attaining economic leverage and having voting leverage so that they could move those power levers and better themselves. So it hasn't happened in terms of reparations. It's going to take generations for it to happen. The one thing that I'm encouraged by is we are, I would say, determined to get these reparations, and we're not going to stop and bow down and refuse to accept the status quo. We're owed. We're owed the equivalent of trillions of dollars now. If you look at the value of enslaved Africans at the end of the Civil War, there was no one industry in the United States that was more valuable than enslaved Africans.
Right.
Not cotton, not tobacco, not the textile mills, not Wall Street, not any industrial area in the United States had as much value as enslaved Africans did. And then you throw on top of that the economic value. You also have this philosophical myth of whites being supreme and superior, and in order to be superior, they have to have someone that they can suppress. And unfortunately, that's us.
E.B. Du Bois coined the saying, and I read it when I was at his museum, that slaves were worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, once they found out this deal about cotton. Oh, and the cotton and the slaves going out picking the cotton. Oh, that took over in the South.
Yeah, cotton was king.
Yeah.
And but just like the sugar cane was in Haiti, just like tobacco was in northeastern United States, cash crops that needed human labor to help develop the value of the product. If you look at the United States when it was first invaded by Europeans, you had a few thousand Europeans with all of this land.
Mm-hmm.
And tens of thousands of Native Americans here, and they looked around and they said, we can't move all these stones, we can't chop down all these trees, we can't divert all these waterways, we can't build all these houses and sheds and barns and et cetera that we need in order to develop it to our satisfaction. We need labor. And we need cheap labor. We need free labor, ideally.
Yeah.
And of course, the Native Americans weren't suitable to meet their enslavement design, so they
rather
started
die.
kidnapping. They'd rather die. They could run away.
Right.
Yeah.
They could run to the backyard, be at their cousin's house, right?
Yeah, they still be Indians.
Yeah. But you go to Africa, and you bring people thousands of miles across the second biggest ocean in the world.
Don't know the language.
Don't know the language, don't know the land, have none of their traditions, have none of their culture, have none of their family, completely lost.
No clothes.
Yeah, nothing,
Yeah.
bereft of everything. And you enslave them, and you build a mighty nation on their backs.
Horrendous torture.
Yeah, torture, pain, murder,
Yeah.
breaking up of families,
Yeah.
taking away your children. You can go down the line. It was
Right.
horrendous.
Right.
And for the conclusion to be drawn that nothing is owed, doesn't pass a smell test. They won't even argue that. They'll just not argue.
Yeah.
It just won't be debated.
Yeah. Brother Malcolm said, if you want an honest trial, to take it to the world court, you ain't gonna get nothing past the Senate and the House.
Oh, no.
But if you take it on the world stage and prove your point, because if you go down to the Black Museum down in Washington, you got a treasure trove of proof.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
yeah.
everybody knows it.
Yeah.
The whole world, Asians knows the
Yeah.
brutality.
Yeah.
And Indians know the brutality that we suffered as a people. No other people could survive what we've been through. You know?
But one of the things that I find in other groups, other nationalities, like Hispanics, Asian or whatever, is that they can seem to come together on some things, important things, whereas we get some guy saying, well, we gonna get reparations. Somebody, I'll work for myself. I don't want to. It's like,
Yeah. But that proves that we've been psychologically damaged.
okay.
We hate one another. And the intentions of all the pain that was inflicted on you, and you were broken down as a man. I mean, it was a lot of fear. The stories don't really tell it like it should be. You're using babies for alligator bait, or taking the mother's children from her, or making a slave boy beat his mama to death, sicking dogs on you. Any type of atrocity that you can think of, we have been inflicted, and we pass it down from generation to generation. That fear, and Joyce DeGruy wrote the book on it, but people don't read the book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And until we address those issues of the fear and the atrocities that we've been through, just like an alcoholic, he'll still alcoholic till he admits that he's alcoholic.
Yeah.
So it's something that we got to deal with as a people, because white folks ain't gonna come along and say, hey, brother, y'all been treated wrong. Or an Asian ain't gonna come along.
No.
They'll come into your neighborhood and take your money,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they won't give nothing back to your community.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just remain to stay dysfunctional, and we have to overcome that.
Like right now, we got Asians. I don't like to say it like that. We got Vietnamese. Now I hear got shops on the south side selling hair and everything to blacks.
Yeah.
It's like they just come from on a living fourth world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in a fourth world, really, you know,
Yeah.
because poverty and everything, and now they're selling blacks hair and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the government gave them a tax break too.
Yeah,
They don't want anybody below black folks.
right.
So they'll give them any type of tax incentive to elevate their community so that they can keep us where we belong.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I don't necessarily think I don't subscribe to the notion that we can't unite, that we don't unite, that we
Yeah.
don't work together. I
We
just
getting-
reject that out of hand.
We're getting better.
But I mean, if you look at one time in the United States, we had thousands of black-owned banks who financed their own communities, who built movie theaters, taxi cab
Yeah.
stands, pharmacies, law offices. We saw that proliferate all through the United States. What's the difference between now and then? It's been a concentrated, legal and extra legal design to take those things away. And that's not because of black unity being lacking. That's because of being targeted by a white supremacist
System.
legal system, governments that came together and said we cannot allow this to proliferate. Black folks ascending economically, politically, and socially to the same level as a white man is dangerous to our designs. So if you have 3 or 4 black banks in the whole state of Michigan, if it's that many, I know a couple of years ago it was 3. It's not because black people didn't come together and want to have banks. They had banks. Those things were taken away. And you have to look at the economic and the legal detriments and obstacles for people being able to take care of themselves. We are uniquely targeted, unlike any
Yeah.
other group,
Yeah.
for designs that are intended to keep us at the lower rank of society. And it goes beyond mere rational numbers. There's something else deeper than this. There's something else that makes this thing stay the way it is,
Yeah.
be sustained all these years.
Yeah.
And it's not because we don't come together and work together.
Right. And I keep asking myself, what is it about us that they don't like? They just hate. They just don't want to see the competition.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's the history of the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can't acknowledge the fact that the people who call themselves white, the phenotype of the European, were the last groups was the last group of people to mutate into existence.
Yeah.
With the lack of melanin, with the lack of coil in the hair, with the narrow nose, all the things we recognize as Europeans, they were the very last people on the planet to evolve. They were also the very last people to be civilized. They were the last people who had organized education. They didn't have the things that we saw in the Nile Valley or even Western and Southern Africa, where you had schools, where you had democratic type governments, where you had universities, where you had art, where you had music, where you had universities, where you had agriculture, where you had a knowledge of astronomy, where you had a knowledge of the solar system and the galaxy. And if you look at the Dogon's writings, they had a knowledge of the universe that is very similar in its writings to what we now call the string theory, which is a new thing in astrophysics. So if you come from a civilization that had achieved all these things in antiquity, what they call paleo history, because it's before them, so of course they can't chart it. So it's just too mysterious.
Right.
Well, we can read about that history. It's not unavailable for us to learn. If you look at that, there is no reason why that they work so hard to keep us in the position that we are, except for the fact, in my opinion, that they don't want the truth revealed. They
Right.
don't want the truth that Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle had to
bullshit.
go to Africa and learn from black teachers.
Right.
They don't want to say that the Pythagoras theorem, which they call the foundation of math, came from a man who went to Africa and went to school for 22 years
Right.
to learn math. In other words, there's nothing supreme about them.
Yeah.
There's nothing superior about them. They are the last of the phenotypes to become civilized and learn.
Yeah. So, to me, what you're saying, what I'm taking from your conversation, is that they're all narcissists. They refuse to admit, to what they're doing.
Well, I wouldn't say all, because there's plenty of people who, again, phenotypically you would call white or European, who are as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable than me and many other people about the true history of the planet and how things came to be the way they are today. But where the power, the halls of power in banking, in politics, in government, in military, those are the people that want to hold on to this myth because it benefits them. And if you can get some people to look in the mirror and say, I'm just not as smart. God didn't like me as much.
Yeah.
I'm just not as blessed. Look at God. God's white.
Yeah.
If you can get people to do that, you don't have to fight as hard. They beat themselves.
Right. And not only that, they use religion to justify slavery.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
It always was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at what education the enslavers allowed the Africans to have, it was limited to what was in the Bible, and it was limited to only certain parts of the Bible.
Yep.
They weren't allowed to speak on the freedom aspects, the redemption parts of the Bible. They were told to be good, be obedient, pie in the sky, and you die. It's all going to be paid in full when you die.
Right.
And many people
Right.
bought that, and they still buy it.
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest organizations in the black community is the church.
Yeah. And they tell you to love everybody, turn
Yeah.
the other cheek,
Yeah.
love those that despitefully use you.
Yeah.
And nobody else in the world does that. A white man would kill anybody that they go up against them.
Yeah.
And Asians ain't gonna, they stand their ground.
Yeah.
But we as a people are told to love yourself or you get yours when you die.
Yeah.
And they're still teaching that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, man, that I try to figure out, where did it come from? I mean, we only been here 400 years, but 400 years, a lot of things could have happened.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that this thing about religion, because
It's man-made.
because our religion wasn't like this when we come from Africa.
Mm-mm.
Not completely. Before you had the European enslavement, the transatlantic slave trade, you also had an Arab slave trade that preceded the Europeans by about 700 years.
Right.
So you did have some Africans by the time the transatlantic slave trade started who had become Islamic. But most Africans still practice the spiritual systems that they'd had for millennia. And for example, what you saw in Haiti was the practice of Voodoo, which is just a part of African spirituality. And French and the Spaniards and the British called it voodoo. And to this day, you'll see black people criticize, well, I don't want to mess with that voodoo, that's devilish. It's ignorance, what they say. They really don't know of what they speak. But the idea that you can talk about a judgment day, you can talk about Holy Trinity, you can talk about death, birth, resurrection, all of these narratives that are the foundation of Christianity. The idea that there's a devil and Satan in heaven, which Muslims talk about. All of those things were allegories that were used in spirituality thousands of years before people we now call Arabs and Europeans came to existence. So if you don't know the history and you just believe what you were told as a 2 or 3 year old the first time you went to Sunday school, because the people who told you that loved
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
It was your mama, it was your daddy, it was your uncle. You're all sitting there in the same pews, and you're hearing the same thing. You have no idea what preceded that thing that's called religion.
Right.
Religion is just dogma. It's codification of a spiritual
But
system.
that's where they want us at. Ignorance
Of course.
in the darkness.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But
It's
like you
easy to
said-
control people if they don't
Right.
know who they are.
Yeah, and like you said, the Arabs were in the slave trade before the Asians got up into that, you know. And like you say, most Muslims in the early part of Islam were black Africans. And if you think about, if you read the scripture about Ham and all them being cursed and all that, and then if you think about Prophet Muhammad, the reason that they didn't want to show his image is because he was a black man. Just like the white man put up a white image instead of, worshiping the black guy that was in existence that they stole from, you know. So
We got to leave it right there, because so much we could talk about into that. But my name is Ahmad Shakaraka, and we catch you at the next block. Peace.
You to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to?
And God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.